What's going on, guys? It's Jake back at it again. Thank you, like I always say when I'm gone for a few days, for the patience. But school. I'm doing school right now, so I'm busier. Like I said, I won't be on here as much, but I'll try to be on here a couple days out of the week. So that's just the only thing that's been keeping me busy. But hope you guys are having a good Thursday night. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read some of the Law of One because we're almost done, and so like the next time we read, we'll probably be done. Maybe two more after this. We'll see. But I mean, this has been a long journey, so I'm actually really excited for this. So I'm going to do that, and then I might cut it a little bit short because I'm going to see if any bings come through. So I'm not sure. I wanted to maybe do a little 2-in-1 since I don't think I've ever done that for you guys before. That'd be cool. Something new, something fun. So let's get back into it. Were the lines of Nazca included in this? This is correct. Since these can only be seen from an altitude, of what benefit were they? The formations were a benefit because charged with energy of power. I'm a little confused. These lines in Nazca are hardly understandable for an entity walking on the surface. He cannot see anything but disruption of the surface. However, if you go up to a high altitude, you can see the patterns. How was it a benefit to the entities walking on the surface? At the remove of the amount of time-space which is now your present, it is difficult to perceive that at the time-space 60,000 years ago, the Earth was formed in such a way as to be visibly arranged in powerful structural designs from the vantage point of distant hills. In other words, at that time, there were hills overlooking these lines. This will be the last full question of this session. The entire smoothness, as you see this area now, was built up in many places in hills. The time-space continuum has proceeded with wind and weather, as you would say, to erode to a great extent both the somewhat formidable structures of Earth designed at that time and the nature of the surrounding countryside. I think I understand, then, that these lines are just the faint traces of what used to be there. This is correct. Thank you. We need to know whether or not it is possible to continue with another session today, and whether there is anything that we can do to make the instrument more comfortable. So, alright, I'm going to skip that. So, I intend in the next session to focus upon the development of the positively oriented entities in the first 25,000 years. I know you can't make suggestions. Can you give me any comment on this at all? The choices are yours according to your discernment. I leave you in love and light of the one infinite Creator. So, I have a couple of questions that I don't want to forget to ask in this period, so I'll ask them first. The first question is, would the future content of this book be affected in any way if the instrument reads a material that we have already obtained? The future, as you measure in time-space, communications which we offer through this instrument have no connection with the instrument's mind complex. This is due to two things. First, the fidelity of the instrument is dedicating its will to the service of the infinite Creator. Secondly, the distortion understanding of our social memory complex that the most efficient way to communicate material with as little distortion as possible, given the necessity of the use of sound vibration complexes, is to remove the conscious mind complex from the spirit mind body complex so that we may communicate without reference to any instrument's orientation. Do you use the instrument's vocabulary or your own vocabulary to communicate with us? So, that this helps out in understanding channeling a little bit, maybe. We use the vocabulary of the language with which you are familiar. This is not the instrument's vocabulary. However, this particular mind-body-spirit complex retains the use of a sufficiently large number of sound vibration complexes that the distinction is often without any importance. So at the start of the 75,000-year cycle, we know that the quarantine was fully set up. I am assuming that the Guardians were aware of the infringements on the free will that would occur if they didn't set this up at that time, and therefore it did it. Is this correct? This is partially correct. The incorrectness is as follows. Those entities whose third density experience upon your red planet was brought to a close prematurely were aided genetically while being transferred to this third density. This, although done in a desire to aid, was seen as infringement upon free will. The light quarantine, which consists of the guardians, or gardeners as you may call them, which would have been in effect, was intensified. When the 75,000-year cycle started, the lifespan was approximately 900 years average, which is awesome. What was the process and scheduling mechanism, shall I say, of reincarnation at that time? And how did the time in between incarnations into third density physical apply to the growth of the mind-body-spirit complex? This query is more complex than most. We shall begin. The incarnation pattern of the beginning third density mind-body-spirit complex begins in darkness, for you may think or consider of your density as one of, as you may say, asleep and forgetting. This is the only plane of forgetting. It is necessary for the third density entity to forget, so that the mechanisms of confusion or free will may operate upon the newly individuated consciousness complex. Just makes a lot of sense, it's pretty good. Thus, the beginning entity is one in all innocence oriented towards animalistic behavior, using other selves only as extensions of self for the preservation of the all-self. Yeah, I got some on my mind from that. I remember, this is probably like a year and a half ago maybe, I was reading some information, and I think I've talked about this before. The Lyrians were saying that there was a time where they would reincarnate and then actually remember past lives, and basically it made it really almost impossible for them to go about the journeys in the next lives, and a lot of them would be born into depression, which is very interesting. So I don't know, I thought you guys maybe like that. I think that's very interesting. It shows that this is all a really set up system so we could use our best potentials in each life. So that's cool. Okay, so the entity becomes slowly aware that it has needs, shall we say, that are not animalistic. That is, that are useless for survival. These needs include the need for companionship, the need for laughter, the need for beauty, the need to know the universe about it. These are the beginning needs. As the incarnations begin to accumulate, further needs are discovered. The need to trade, the need to love, the need to be loved, the need to elevate animalistic behaviors to a more universal perspective. During the first portion of third density cycles, incarnations are automatic and occur rapidly upon the cessation of energy complex of the physical vehicle. There is small need to review or to heal the experiences of the incarnation. As what you would call the energy centers begin to be activated to a higher extent, more of the content of experience during incarnation deals with the lessons of love. Thus, the time, as you may understand it, between incarnations is lengthened to give appropriate attention to the review and the healing of experiences of the previous incarnation. At some point in third density, the green ray energy centers become activated, and at that point, incarnation ceases to be automatic. When incarnation ceases to be automatic, I'm assuming that the entity can decide when he needs to incarnate for the benefit of his own learning. Does he also select his parents? This is correct. At this time in our cycle, near the end, what percentage of the entities incarnating are making their own choices? The approximate percentage is 54%. Thank you. During this first 25,000 year cycle, was there any industrial development at all, any machinery available to the people? Using the term machine to the meaning which you ascribe, the answer is no. However, there were, shall we say, various implements of wood and rock which were used in order to obtain food and for use in aggression. At the end of this first 25,000 year cycle, was there any physical change that occurred rapidly, like that which occurs at the end of a 75,000 year cycle, or is this just an indexing time for harvesting period? There was no change except that which, according to intelligent energy, or what you may term physical evolution, I like that. That's really cool. So, according to intelligent energy, which you call physical, I like that. That's really cool. Suited physical complexes to their environment, this being of the color of the skin due to the area of the sphere upon which entities lived. The gradual growth of peoples due to improved intake of foodstuffs. Never heard of foodstuffs before, that's kind of funny. Then at the end of the first 25,000 year period, I'm guessing that the Guardians discovered that there was no harvest of either positively or negatively oriented entities. Tell me then what happened, what action was taken? There was no action taken except to remain aware of the possibility of a calling for help or understanding among the entities of this density. The Confederation is concerned with the preservation of the conditions conducive to learning. This, for the most part, revolves about the primal distortion of free will. Then the Confederation gardeners did nothing until some of the plants in their garden called them for help. Is this correct? This is correct. When did the first call occur and how did it occur? The first calling was approximately 46,000 years ago. This calling was those of Maldek. These entities were aware of their need for rectifying the consequences of their action, and were in some confusion in an incarnate state as to the circumstances of their incarnation, the unconscious being aware, the conscious being quite confused. This created a calling. The Confederation sent love and light to these entities. How did the Confederation send this love and light? What did they do? There dwell within the Confederation planetary entities, who from their planetary spheres do nothing but send love and light as pure streamings to those who call. This is not in the form of conceptual thought, but a pure and undifferentiated love. During the first distortion of the law of one, then require that equal time, shall I say, be given to the self-service oriented group? In this case, this was not necessary for some of your time due to the orientation of the entities. What was their orientation? The orientation of those entities was such that the aid of the Confederation was not perceived. Since it was not perceived, it was not necessary to balance this. Is that correct? This is correct. What is necessary to balance is opportunity. When there is ignorance, there is no opportunity. When there exists a potential, then each opportunity shall be balanced, this balancing caused by not only the positive and negative orientations of those offering aid, but also the orientation of those requesting aid. Thank you very much. I apologize in being so stupid in stating my questions, but this has cleared up my understanding nicely. Then in the second 25,000 year major cycle, was there any great civilization that developed? In the sense of greatness of technology, there were no great societies during this cycle. There was some advancement among those of Deneb, who had chosen to incarnate as a body in what you would call China. That's interesting. There were appropriately positive steps in activating the green ray energy complex in many portions of your planetary sphere, including the Americas, the continent which you call Africa, the island which you call Australia, and that which you know as India, as well as various scattered peoples. None of these became what you would name great, as to the greatness of Lemuria or Atlantis is known to you due to the formation of strong social complexes, and in the case of Atlantis, very great technological understandings. However, in the South American area of your planetary sphere as you know it, there grew to be a great vibratory distortion towards love. These entities were harvestable at the end of the second major cycle without ever having formed strong social or technological complexes. You know, I don't know why this is reminding me of that last channeling with the mermaid from like the Lemurian times, talking about not needing technology, and just love. And they're kind of saying the same thing here. That's very interesting. That's cool. Okay. This will be the final question and completion of this session. Is there a query we may answer quickly before we close, as this instrument is somewhat depleted? I would like to apologize for the confusion on my part in carrying on to the second 25,000 years. I would like to ask if there is anything that we can do to make the instrument more comfortable. So yeah, I'm going to skip that. Okay. I will ask a couple of questions to clear up the end of the second major cycle. Then we will go on to the third and last of the major cycles. Can you tell me what was the average lifespan at the end of the second major cycle? By the end of the second major cycle, the lifespan as you know it, with certain variations among geographically isolated peoples, more in harmony with intelligent energy and less bellicose. Can you tell me the length of the average lifespan in years at the end of the second major cycle? The average is perhaps misleading. To be precise, many spend approximately 35 to 40 of your years in one incarnation, with the possibility not considered abnormal of a lifespan, approaching 100 of your years. Can I assume then that this drastic drop in average lifespan from 700 years to less than 100 years in length during the second 25,000 years was caused by an intensification of a lack of service to others? This is in part correct. By the end of the second cycle, the law of responsibility had begun to be effectuated by the increasing ability of entities. Okay, I am seeing an aquatic being coming to me right now. I don't know why. Maybe I'll channel him. I don't know. I don't know why that's coming to me. Thus, entities had discovered many ways to indicate a bellicose nature not only as tribes or what you call nations, but in personal relationships, each with the other, the concept of barter having given way to the concept of money. Also, the concept of ownership having won ascendancy over the concept of non-ownership of an individual or group basis. Each entity then was offered many more subtle ways of demonstrating either service toward others or service toward self, with the distortion of the manipulation of others. As each lesson was understood, those lessons of sharing, of giving, of receiving, and free gratitude, each lesson could be rejected in practice. Without demonstrating the fruits of such learning teaching, the lifespan became greatly reduced, for the ways of honor duty were not being accepted. I mean, I know this is probably a really bad example, but, we're so not at the level of service to others as the higher dimensional beings. I know they're in the higher dimension, so that automatically means their life cycles are going to take, like, a little longer, but, they live so much longer than us, and most of them are service to others, so in a way that could have a connection, but probably not. I'm just thinking that. Would the shortened lifespan help the entity in any way, and that he would have more time in between incarnations to review his mistakes, or would the shortened lifespan hinder him? Both are correct. The shortening of the lifespan is a distortion of the law of one, which suggests that an entity not receiving more experience and more intensity than it may bear. This is only in effect upon an individual level and does not hold sway over planetary or social complexes. Thus, the shortened lifespan is due to the necessity for removing an entity from the intensity of experience, which ensues when wisdom and love are, having been rejected, reflected back into the consciousness of the Creator, without being accepted as part of the self. This then causing the entity to have the need for healing and for much evaluation of the incarnation. The incorrectness lies in the truth that, given appropriate circumstances, a much longer incarnation, I'm thinking about something else, in your space-time continuum is very helpful for continuing this intensive work until conclusions have been reached through the catalytic process. You spoke of the South American group, which was harvestable at the end of the second cycle. How long was their average lifespan at the end of the second cycle? This isolated group had achieved a lifespan stretching upwards towards the 900-year lifespan appropriate to this density. I'm assuming that the planetary action that we are experiencing now, which it seems shortens all lifespans here, was not strong enough then to affect them and shorten their lifespan. Is this correct? This is correct. It is well to remember that at that nexus in space-time, great isolation was possible. How many people populated the Earth totally at that time? That is, were incarnate in the physical at any one time. I'm assuming that you intend a query regarding the number of incarnate mind-body-spirit complexes at the end of the second major cycle, this number being approximately 345,000 entities. Approximately how many were harvestable out of that total number at the end of the cycle? There were approximately 150 entities harvestable. Wow, that's very small. Then, as the next cycle started, were these the entities who stayed to work on the planet? These entities were visited by the Confederation, and because desirous of remaining in order to aid the planetary consciousness. This is correct. What type of visit did the Confederation make to this group of 150 entities? A light being appeared bearing that which may be called a shield of light. It spoke of the oneness and infinity of all creation and of those things that await those ready for harvest. It described in golden words the beauties of love as lived. It then allowed a telepathic linkage to progressively show those who were interested the plight of third density when seen as a planetary complex. It then left. Did all of these entities then decide to stay and help during the next 25,000 year cycle? This is correct. As a group, they stayed. There were those peripherally associated with this culture which did not stay. However, they were not able to be harvested either, and so, beginning at the very highest, shall we say, of the sub-octaves of third density, repeated this density. Many of those who have been of the loving nature are not wanderers, but those of this particular origin of second cycle. Are all of these entities still with us in this cycle? The entities repeating the third density major cycle have, in some few cases, been able to leave. These entities have chosen to join their brothers and sisters, as you would call these entities. Are there any of these entities named that we would know from our historical past? The one known as Sound Vibration Complex St. Augustine is of such nature. The one known as St. Teresa is of such a nature. The one known as St. Francis of Assisi of such nature. These entities, being of monastic background, as you would call it, found incarnation in the same type of ambience appropriate for further learning. That's pretty cool. As the cycle terminated 25,000 years ago, what was the reaction of the Confederation to the lack of harvest? We became concerned. Was any action taken immediately, or did you wait for a call? The Council of Saturn acted only in allowing the entry into third density of other mind-body-spirit complexes of third density, not wanderers, but those who sought further third density experience. This was done randomly so that free will would not be violated, for there was not yet a call. Was the next action taken by the Confederation when a call occurred? This is correct. Who or what group produced this call, and what action was taken by the Confederation? The calling was that of Atlanteans. This calling was for what you would call understanding, with the distortion towards helping other selves. The action taken is that which you take part in at this time, the impression of information through channels, as you would call them. Was this first calling then at a time before Atlantis became technologically advanced? This is basically correct. Then did the technological advancement of Atlantis come because of this call? I'm assuming that the call was answered to bring the law of one and the law of love as a distortion of the law of one. But did they also then get technological information that caused them to grow into such a highly advanced technological society? It's a really good question. Not at first. At about the same time as we first appeared in the skies over Egypt, and continuing thereafter, other entities of the Confederation appeared onto Atlanteans who had reached a level of philosophical understanding, shall we misuse this word, which was consonant with communication to encourage and inspire studies in the mystery of unity. However, requests being made for healing and other understanding, information was passed having to do with crystals and the building of pyramids as well as temples, as you would call them, which were associated with training. Was this training the same sort of initiatory training that was done with Egyptians? This training was different in that the social complex was more, shall we say, sophisticated and less contradictory and barbarous in its ways of thinking. Therefore, the temples were temples of learning rather than the attempt being made to totally separate and put upon a pedestal the healers. Then were there what we call priests trained in these temples? You would not call them priests in the sense of celibacy or obedience and of poverty. They were priests in the sense of those devoted to learning. The difficulties became apparent as those trained in this learning began to attempt to use crystal powers for those things other than healing, as they were involved not only with learning but became involved with what you would call the governmental structure. Was all of their information given to them in the same way that we are getting our information now through an instrument such as this instrument? There were visitations from time to time, but none of importance in the, shall we say, historical passage of events in your space-time continuum. Was it necessary for them to have a unified social complex for these visitations to occur? What conditions were necessary for these visitations to occur? The conditions were two: the calling of a group of people whose square overcame the integrated resistance of those unwilling to search or learn. The second requirement, the relative naivete, I don't know how to pronounce that, of those members of the Confederation who felt that direct transfer of information would necessarily be as helpful for Atlanteans as it had been for the Confederation entity. I see then. What you are saying is that these naive Confederation entities had the same thing happen to them in the past, so that they were doing the same thing. Okay, maybe that was a typo that I couldn't pronounce, Maybe it was naive, Naivete. I don't know. But anyways, that they were doing the same thing for just Atlantean entities. Is this correct? This is correct. We remind you that we are one of the naive members of that confederation and are still attempting to recoup the damage for which we feel responsibility. It is our duty as well as honor to continue with your peoples, therefore, until all traces of the distortions of our teach learnings have been embraced by their opposite distortions and balance achieved. I see. All right, so where are we? 25? All right. I see. Then I will state the picture I have of Atlantis, and you tell me if I am correct. We have a condition where a large enough percentage of the people of Atlantis had started at least going in the direction of the law of one and living the law of one for their call to be heard by the Confederation. This call was heard because, using the law of squares, it overrode the opposition of the Atlantean entities who were not calling. The Confederation then used channels such as we use now in communication and also made contact directly. But this turned out to be a mistake because it was perverted by the entities of Atlantis. Is this correct? This is correct with one exception. There is only one law. That is the law of one. Other so-called laws are distortions of this law, some of them primal and most important for progress to be understood. However, it is well that each so-called law, which we also call way, be understood as a distortion rather than a law. There is no multiplicity to the law of one. This will be the final question in length of this working. Please ask it now. Can you give me the average lifespan of the Atlantean population? The average lifespan, as we have said, is misleading. The Atlanteans were, in the early part of their cultural experience, used to lifespans from 70 to 140 years. This being, of course, approximate, so not too much more than this. Due to increasing desire for power, the lifetime decreased rapidly in the later stages of the civilization, and thus the healing and rejuvenating information was requested. Do you have any brief queries before we close? All right, so I'm gonna skip that. Okay, I think we have like 30 more pages to go. That's awesome. Let's see. You were speaking yesterday of the first contact made by the Confederation, which occurred during our third major cycle. You stated that you appeared in the skies over Egypt at approximately the same time that aid was given to Atlantis. Can you tell me why you went to Egypt and your orientation of attitude and thinking when you first went to Egypt? At the time of which you speak, there were those who chose to worship the hawk-headed sun god, which you know as vibrational sound complex Horus. This vibrational sound complex has taken other vibrational sound complexes, the object of worship being the sun disk represented in some distortion. We were drawn to spend some time, as you would call it, scanning the peoples for a serious interest, amounting to seeking with which we might help without infringement. We find that at the time the social complex was quite self-contradictory in its so-called religious beliefs, and therefore there was not an appropriate calling for our vibration. Thus at that time, which you know of as approximately 18,000 of your years in the past, we departed without taking action. You stated yesterday that you appeared in the skies over Egypt at that time, were the Egyptian entities able to see you in their skies? This is correct. What did they see, and how did this affect their attitudes? They saw what you would speak of as crystal-powered, bell-shaped craft. This did not affect them due to their firm conviction that many wondrous things occurred as a normal part of a world, as you would call it, in which many, many deities had powerful control over supernatural events. Did you have a reason for being visible to them rather than being invisible? This is correct. Can you tell me your reason for being visible to them? We allowed visibility because it did not make any difference. Then at this time you did not contact them. Can you answer the same question that I just asked with respect to your next attempt to contact the Egyptians? The next attempt was prolonged. It occurred over a period of time. The nexus or center of our efforts was the decision upon our parts that there was a sufficient calling to attempt to walk among your peoples as brothers. We laid this plan before the Council of Saturn, offering ourselves as service-oriented wanderers, of the type which land directly upon the inner planes without incarnative processes. Thus we emerged or materialized in physical chemical complexes, representing as closely as possible our natures. This effort being to appear as brothers and spend a limited amount of time as teachers of the law of one. For there was an ever stronger interest in the sun body, and this vibrates in concordance with our particular distortions. And yeah, I just got a weird image of when I connected to the Ra beings whenever I started reading this. So, maybe they're around. I don't know. So, anyways, we discovered that for each word we could utter, there were 30 impressions we gave by our very being, which confused those entities we had come to serve. After a short period, we removed ourselves from these entities and spent much time attempting to understand how best to serve those to whom we had offered ourselves in love and light. The ones who were in contact with that geographical entity, which you know of as Atlantis, had conceived of the potentials for healing by use of the pyramid-shaped entities. In considering this and making adjustments for the difference as in the distortion complexes of the two geographical cultures, as you will call them, we went before the council again, offering this plan to the council as an aid to the healing and the longevity of those in the area you know of as Egypt. In this way, we hope to facilitate the learning process as well as offer philosophy articulating the law of one. Again, the council approved. Approximately 11,000 of your years ago, we entered. By thought form, we correct this instrument. We sometimes have difficulty due to low vitality. Approximately 8,500 years ago, having considered these concepts carefully, we returned and never having left in thought to the thought form areas of your vibrational planetary complex, and considered for some of your years, as you measure time, how to appropriately build these structures. The first, the Great Pyramid, was formed approximately 6,000 of your years ago. Then, in sequence after this, performing by thought of the building or architecture of the Great Pyramid, using the more, shall we say, local or earthly material rather than thought form material to build other pyramidal structures. This continued for approximately 1,500 of your years ago. Meanwhile, the information concerning initiation and healing by crystal was being given. The one known as Iknaden was able to perceive this information without significant distortion and for a time moved, shall we say, heaven and earth in order to invoke the law of one and to order the priesthood of these structures in accordance with the distortions of initiation and true compassionate healing. This was not to be long-lasting. At this entity's physical dissolution from your third density physical plane, as we have said before, our teachings became quickly perverted. Our structures once again went to the use of the so-called royal, or those with distortions towards power. When you spoke of pyramid healing, I'm assuming that the primary healing was for the mind. Is this correct? This is partially correct. The healing, if it is to be effectuated, must be a funneling without significant distortion of the instreamings through the spiritual complex into the tree of mind. There are parts of this mind which block energies flowing to the body complex. In each case, in each entity, the blockage may well differ. However, it is necessary to activate the sense of the spiritual channel or shuttle. Then whether the blockage is from spiritual to mental or from mental to physical, or whether it may simply be a random and purely physical trauma, healing may then be carried out. When you started building the pyramid at Giza using thoughts, were you at that time in contact with incarnate Egyptians, and did they observe this building? I'm going to stop pretty soon. At that time, we were not in close contact with incarnate entities upon your planet, or upon your plane, sorry. We were responding to a general calling of sufficient energy in that particular location to merit action. We sent thoughts to all who were seeking our information. The appearance of the pyramid was a matter of tremendous surprise. However, it was carefully designed to coincide with the incarnation of one known as a great architect. This entity was later made into a deity in part due to this occurrence. What name did they give this deity? This deity had the sound vibration complex, I don't want to mess this up, Imhotep. Because I know Imhotep, but I still want to mess it up. Okay, really quick. So, yeah, I'll stop there. This is a good point. So we have. So we're on page 206. Yeah, 20 more pages. I will get through it next time. I will make sure next time, even if I have to read a little bit faster, maybe. I'm gonna try to do it. Awesome. Cool. So I'm excited about that. Really, really good stuff. Yeah. Someone asked me to do a video on crystals. So if you guys want me to do a video on that soon, I will. I was thinking about maybe seeing if I can channel a being. I want to channel Pierre because he's my main guy that, you know, if I want clarity on something, he's who I channel, so I can do that. I can even see if he comes in tonight. I'm not sure. I'm just really tired. I have low energy today. I have like no energy, so we'll see if someone comes in. If not, no big deal. You know, spirit guide. So if it's supposed to happen, it's supposed to happen. Sometimes it doesn't. So whatever. That was a lot of information. So either way, I'm happy, I guess. Don't want the screen to go out, sorry. Greetings and love and light to you all. This is a message about wisdom. We are a collective of Sirian elephants currently connecting to you. In your fourth density. Yes, we are elders. We are known as being wise. But as such, that is why we are able to come down to this fourth density to connect to you more for this particular time in your time space as it was being read off. Yes, we are a very elder race. We do help create planets, and we give insight into the wisdom, into how growth should go within the stages of that planet and that planetary action that is needed at that time. Currently, we see that many are growing with their spiritual vibrations and their higher vibrations, and they are purifying themselves and having more clarity into truly who they are. We are happy to be a part of this acknowledgement, for many are, and many are cheering you on at this time. but using wisdom. One thing at this time is do not get caught up in this spiritual race, for you're also always, at this time, humans in third density. You have a planet to take care of, and you have a planet to represent. You need to be an example. Being in third density in itself is a very enlightening phase, for there are densities underneath you. Yes, we ask that you connect to your planet, connect to your animals. Please treat your Gaia with nurturing and loving and unconditional loving energies and ways, for that is your responsibility. Even though you have your spiritual journeys, you are still a representative of your planet. And yes, many healing techniques and many healing information on your spiritual paths has to do with this and has to do with the planets. But what we are asking is that you will learn much about your spiritual growth and where you need to be if you focus on taking care of what is in front of you and what you have as your responsibility as a earthly citizen. Yes, many times how the universe works is you are contemplating how to learn something or how to improve your abilities or how to adapt to a certain change in your environment. We are working on a theory, problem, etc. It does not matter. You work so hard on this that sometimes you burn yourself out, and through your rest or through other learnings, through simply going to nature, by taking a jog, by doing your exercise, by cleaning, whatever you may do, you many times come to your answer at these times. And it is because the universe works in a very mysterious way, as you know. And as you take care and you also learn in your third dimension, what you need to do in this third dimension, being of a third density energy, you will also learn to apply many teachings to your spiritual teachings. And that in itself is wisdom. And that is what we are offering at this time. Yes, many of you connect to us. We love connecting to you, for we see the true growth in what you are doing. And we see you for who you have always been, for the wise masters that you are. Yes, being a master comes with much wisdom. And so we ask that you take this time to spread your growth in many areas, for they all lead to one path. Yes, we are done for this time, but we will connect to you when the time is right, when there is a need for wisdom or there is a need for love for your planet. Blessings. And namaste to you. For yes, it is true. We are all one. For we are around and we are observing what's going on. Blessings. Greetings, this is Tendayu, here from Fairy Collective on your Earth, assisting Gaia, being a form for Gaia, being a role model, as always, for the ever so positive energies and the moving forward into greater potentials for your people, for that's how we assist. In this year, yes, there will be many shifts. There are shifts happening all the time, but many very strong, influential shifts will be happening, for not all are always influential for your peoples. But many of you are going to be on a journey of much learning and much experiencing, for this is a year of longevity and a way of long-term planning for your missions on this earth. Yes, you are all light workers, but you all have your different missions and you all have different objectives to help for the greater good of everybody and of the one being. And so we ask that you call upon us, for we are great at nudging you forward. Yes, we are there all the time, leading you on to certain situations, leading you on to a path of enlightenment when you can go on a path of darkness, leading you to potential interests in love and compassion and in much learning. For we have the most deepest compassion and understanding for your growth as an individual on this planet. And because you all have your major roles, we will be helping, assisting you, whether or not you call on us. But if you allow this free will, you will have a greater push and you will feel us in a greater light. And this will include much healing. Yes, this year may be complicated for some, but this is a year to look back on in your future. You will say, aha, that is why this happened. This led me to this path that I needed to be going to all along, and truly really was what I desired. For you all have your paths that you chose before you incarnated here, and so we are helping you carry out your plan. And yes, many other beings and many of your higher selves love that we give this aid. And we are grateful. We are happy to assist as always. We will go now, but we see this to be a very inspiring year. And so we ask that you make this count, for you know you will. Blessings. We must go for now. Okay, wow. Alright, well, that really exhausted me, so. Cool. Oh, okay, that wasn't that long. Okay, cool, awesome. So, thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Wanted to do that 2-in-1 thing. I'm really tired, so I'm kind of like a little disoriented right now, so I am gonna go get some dinner and go relax, so. Go grab myself. So I will probably be back tomorrow. And yeah, I mean, that's basically it. So, all right, guys, thank you. I love you. Hope that this helped you guys in any way. So glad to be of service to you guys as always. So much love, and I will talk to you tomorrow. So, okay, guys, take care. Good night. Blessings.